Everyone, we'll get started in about 30 seconds. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Environmental Law Institute's webinar, Climate Core Programs Using Skills-Based Training to Combat the Climate Crisis. My name is Madison Calhoun, and I'm the Senior Manager of Educational Programs here at the Environmental Law Institute. We have a great program lined up for you today. I want to take a moment to thank all of our fantastic speakers for being here today and for taking the time out of their schedules to prepare informative and timely content for this program, especially around the busy holiday season. I also want to thank our audience for tuning in. We appreciate your engagement. Today's program will feature a roundtable discussion with our three wonderful panelists led by our moderator. The program will be recorded and will be posted to the event webpage for ELI members to view later. So if you're an ELI member and you're unable to view the entire webinar, you're welcome to watch the recording, which will be available within a couple of business days of the event. If you'd like to become an ELI member, you can find more information on eli.org/associates-programs. We will be taking questions as we go today, so please submit any questions that you have for the panel using Zoom's Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. The chat will also be open, and we welcome you to use it to post any observations or comments throughout the program. If you have a question that you wish our speakers to address, though, please do put it in the Q&A box, not the chat. I'll go ahead and turn things over to our moderator, Marianne Lavelle. Marianne is a reporter for Inside Climate News. She's covered environment, science, law, and business in Washington, D.C. for more than 2 decades. She's won the Polk Award, the Investigative Editors and Reporters Award, and numerous other honors. Marianne received her master's degree from Columbia University Graduate School of Journalism, and she's a graduate of Villanova University. So Marianne, I will hand things over to you. Thank you all so much for being here today. Oh, and I think you're muted, Marianne.
Thank you, Madison, and thank you, ELI, for organizing this. As I told the organizers, I relied on ELI for my whole time here in Washington as just a great resource. And it's so fantastic to be with this panel talking about a really exciting subject. The Climate Core was part of President Biden's idea for addressing climate from the very start, and he announced the rollout in September, and there's going to be some big announcements this week, and Ken will talk a little bit about them. The one thing I wanted to say about Climate Core is everyone knows about it as a kind of a descendant of President Franklin Delano Roosevelt's Conservation Corps. In some ways, the Climate Corps really it goes beyond FDR's program. First of all, dealing with a planetary crisis, and secondly, incorporating things like environmental justice into the work. So I really look forward to what the panelists are going to say. So let's go right to them. I kind of wanted to start with Ken Goodson, who is the director of AmeriCorps. And I want to ask each of you to talk about what inspired you, talk about who you are, but also what inspired you to get involved in youth training in skills to address the climate crisis.
Thank you, Marianne. And Madison, thank you for the invite and the opportunity to join you all today. My name is Ken Goodson. I serve as the director of AmeriCorps' National Civilian Community Corps, or what we call NCCC, which is one of the four major programs of the federal agency responsible for service and volunteerism, which is AmeriCorps. AmeriCorps NCCC is the one program that's wholly administered and operated by the federal agency. Most of what we do is make awards and grants through our three other major programs. I've been with AmeriCorps for a little over a decade. Was previously with Peace Corps for about 15 years, starting as a environmental conservation volunteer before moving into staff roles that had me in 6 different countries, ending in my hardship post, which was Washington, D.C. What inspired me to get into this work? I think 2 things really jumped to mind. One, I had some opportunity previously to work very much at the grassroots level, and then also the opportunity to work really at the macro policy level during a stint at the Millennium Challenge Corporation, and believe with something that is such an existential threat like climate change that you really need both those polar ends operating. You need the big picture policy pieces, but you really do need the grassroots, hyper-local, civic engaged approach as well. And that's sort of my jam and the space that I like to be in, the hyper grassroots. I also find young adults inspiring. That was part of the reason I ended up with a Peace Corps career, and part of the reason that I am at AmeriCorps these days. The NCCC, the program where I work, is for 18 to 26-year-olds. And anytime I have concerns about the future direction of our nation or the world, I spend a little bit of time around those 18 to 26-year-olds and find that my confidence about the future direction is perhaps more positive than if I rely just on other sources of information. So I really like being around that energy and strongly believe that young adults represent the future for us and the path to potential solutions for significant challenges like climate change. I feel confident we have a good cadre of future leaders in that group of young adults, and feel privileged to be a part of supporting them to start that professional journey. That's me. I'm Ken Goodson, the director of AmeriCorps' National Civilian Community Corps.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Ken. Across the country, people haven't been just waiting, doing nothing for a nationwide climate corps to get off the ground. There's been such a lot of activity by nonprofits and at the local level. And why don't I just go around and ask Rola Halanjawi? Did I say your name right?
Halawanji.
Halawanji.
Almost.
Sorry, from the Bay Area Community Resources, to talk about what you all are doing and how you got involved.
Yeah, sure thing. First of all, I wanted to thank you, Eli, for inviting me to this wonderful panel. It is such an honor to share this panel with amazing folks working in similar spaces. So, this is an interesting question because, one of the things I always share with our members is that, a journey is never a straightforward, path. And I'm a classic example of this. I grew up in Africa. I spent my childhood in Ivory Coast, my teen years in Tunisia. After graduation, after I graduated from high school, I had no idea what I wanted to do. But one of the things that I knew deep down in my core that I needed to pursue was a higher education. And, where I come from, that's not something that is, required for young female. And I wanted to go to France, and my parents said no. So I came back a year later and I told them, well, if you don't want me to go 2 hours away, I'll just go across the world. I want to go to California to study English. It was a tough pill to swallow for my family, but I'm very grateful that they really understood my passion for education and also supported me in making, you know, a major shift. It's very uncommon for, you know, again, for young females to leave their country and really go across the world. So I'm saying all this because, you know, I think it's that deep passion for education that brought me here, and it completely changed the course of my life. I had no expectation whatsoever to be in this space today. I was not aware. I mean, I was to some extent, but at that time I was not aware of, you know, environmental impact was not on my radar, but rather more interested in business management, global management. Graduated from USC School of Business and realized that I completely hated it. I felt like a fish out of water. That wasn't my thing, and that pushed me to the nonprofit sector. And it was during I was doing a master's in Shanghai, China, and it was during that experience that I realized the impact of human action on our environment. You know, one example I like to share is that the first week I was in Shanghai, I was lightheaded the whole time. And that was because there was not enough oxygen in the air. All the pollution was trapped, you know, in the core of Shanghai, which led me to you know, be interested in urban design and eventually landed on environmental port policies and brought me back to the US. And it was perfect timing at that time. You know, the ports of Long Beach and LA were going through their green port policies. And I got a chance to really stumble into workforce development, working on programs to prepare people to for green careers, and develop training programs that would fill the gap for qualified people to work in this sector. So all this to say that, you know, I've had a lot of experience building programs. I stumbled, you know, onto climate change and the environmental sector, but I also found a deep passion combining, you know, the education with wanting to make an impact on our world, our the environment that we work in. With California Climate Action Corps, this is a relatively young program. You know, it started as a pilot in January 2021. I came in the picture in summer 2021, and you know, what I thought was going to be a temporary program turned into you know, one of the largest programs, one of the largest AmeriCorps programs in California. We have grown and expanded tremendously. We, in partnership with California Volunteers and also, you know, SCI, the Energy Coalition, we were able to build a foundation for, you know, for a climate corps that really focuses on direct action. And this is a little bit unique because, you know, there are a lot of AmeriCorps program focused in the field of climate change. But this program specifically is focused in 3 areas: urban greening, organic waste and food recovery, and wildfire resiliency, which are 3 of the areas that are a priority for California. And our impact is tangible. Fellows are not working on putting proposals together or doing research, but rather being on the ground in communities, working directly, you know, with community residents and participants to uplift their communities. So yeah, so that's a general gist of my background and the work that of California Climate Action Corps. And Marianne, you are on mute.
Unmute, sorry. Thank you. Thank you so much, Rolla. Jake Pollock works for Strategic Energy Innovations, and again, one of the many groups that have been working all along on building the idea of building youth skills right on the ground. So tell us about yourself, how you came to this, and what SEI does in this space.
Thanks, Marianne, and thanks also to ELI for the invite. Really grateful to be here and have the opportunity to share the panel with these other powerhouses and folks doing really exciting, interesting work in the field. For over 25 years at this point, SEI has been a community-based nonprofit and has expanded nationally, starting in California, starting our Climate Corps program with BACR, really in close partnership over many, many years. Really learned from them and learned with them how to grow the program into new states. And so since 2010, we've had Climate Corps, originally as an AmeriCorps program, and has really expanded out to include all sectors and not be AmeriCorps specific, though we do still have one AmeriCorps program. And, in that time, we've seen all kinds of scopes. Rolla, mentioned some great examples, what's needed in California. Certainly in other regions, different scopes are needed. We really try and assess and listen deeply to what communities actually need on the ground and be responsive to that and find creative and sometimes scrappy ways to fund fellows' work and to work with community-based organizations when we can and bring fellows from those communities into those roles as much as possible. So to date, I think it's somewhere around 600 partners that we've worked with in many states and 800 fellows across the US. So we've done this for a while, but we're also still trying to innovate, and we're still on some level really an upstart and part of this group who's really thinking of this at a national scale and the scale that is needed for the response to the climate crisis. So we're excited to be in this mix now when it feels like this wonderful idea is finally kind of taking shape and gathering some real momentum. The way that I came into the field in particular have some echoes certainly of Ann and Rolla's international experience. So for almost 20 years at this point, I've been thinking about climate and working for the first half really in higher education and in study abroad programs in South Asia and in the Bahamas and other places, really thinking about how people live well in a place and what are all of those, what are the equity issues that are almost inherent in any urban, non-urban, just international setting, and really bringing people into the field through that lens, as opposed to kind of strictly, managerial sustainability or thinking about climate from a policy level. But then I started teaching at University of Oregon in their policy department and was leading workshops for mid-career professionals for a number of years. And what I was noticing is that for mid-career folks, they were happy with and it was absolutely important for them to show incremental change in their systems that they were working in across all the different sectors, water, waste, energy, et cetera, the ones you'd expect, the usual suspects. But what I saw was that some of the mindsets for earlier career folks, when they had the opportunity to kind of shift and think differently with frameworks, instead of thinking about sustainability as kind of like a steady state or that we're somehow able to kind of solve these challenges with a little bit business as usual, we really shifted over to resilience thinking and giving folks coming into the field a mindset that was much more expansive, that included climate impacts, that included environmental justice, was much more comprehensive, and really kind of set them on a different path. I think fundamentally in terms of kind of their hearts and minds of what they wanted to do in the field, how they thought they were going to do it, where they thought those levers for change actually were in the different sectors that they wanted to work in. And then relatively soon after that, just found, that I wanted to be able to do that work in a more expansive way. We were working with, a handful of students every year, but in coming to SEI about 7 years ago, I was able to really work at a much larger scale, which was exciting and also a bit daunting. And one of the things I immediately found was kind of taking that mindset, shifting over to resilience thinking with these fellows, early career folks in Climate Corps, was that we really needed to start thinking about personal resilience. So at least at minimum being trauma aware or trauma informed in terms of the approaches that we took to training people going into the field. So we helped at least buffer, or I don't know that we can ever really ensure people burning out within a couple of years, to give them the tools, the resources, the community connections that they needed to be successful, which I think at this point we're responsive to that, and we realize is just as important as the skills training. And so I think, even in the 7 years I've been at SEI, more than half of those years we've had incredible wildfires, and all of these fellows experience wildfire, sometimes directly or indirectly, whether it's vicarious traumatization in the communities they're working in, or they were actually displaced by wildfire. And so what we realized was, this is something where these folks are coming in having experienced Hurricane Katrina or Hurricane Sandy as youth, right? So they've already seen climate impacts. It's a different generation than mine, even than many of the peers and many folks that I work with who are older and have more experience in the field. And so I think my key inspiration now for the work is this sense of really an intergenerational imperative. The people coming into the field, are as old as sort of my work experience in the field, which is mind blowing, but it gives me pause. How can I learn? Basically, as Ken was saying too, how can I be inspired? How can I learn from them? What the field continues to evolve, and it's not like we have all the answers. So how can we stay open also to what we learn from them? So that's what keeps me coming back to this work every morning. It's the challenges, and I'll wrap it up there. Thank you.
Oh, Jake, thank you so much. Such good points there on that young people just have a completely different lived experience of climate than many of us who are older and didn't have those formative years just being hit by one disaster after another. And I do want to get back to what you talked about trauma-informed, addressing this with your workforce. Let's talk about what Climate Corps really looks like, or we're hoping that it looks like on the ground. And there's some developments just this week, and that's why I want to kind of go right to Ken to talk specifically about the Forest Corps program and what are the developments this week, and tell us a little bit about what young people would be doing in that program.
Thank you, Marianne. I'll take a half step back. Rolla and Jake both touched on this really well. AmeriCorps members have been engaged in climate action for many years. This is sort of the bedrock of what the agency makes possible. In FY22 alone, it was 117 million in grant funding that went towards climate resilience. And that is an increase. So it's something that is ticking up. The program where I work, again, AmeriCorps NCCC, has for a long time worked really at the state level with the U.S. Forest Service to help fill some gaps in needs for conservation and fire management style work. That state level work actually evolved in recent years and became a regional partnership in the southeastern United States with the Forest Service's southern region and the AmeriCorps NCCC southern region as well. So we've been running that for about 3 years now. We were approached by the Forest Service a little over a year ago and asked about potentially scaling what had been a state level agreement, then became a regional one, and was there interest in doing something possibly at the national level. For those of you who are familiar with the AmeriCorps NCCC program, you'll know that we administer something called FEMA Corps, which in a nutshell, FEMA, after Hurricane Katrina, going back to Jake's point, FEMA had seen the work that AmeriCorps NCCC teams could do in the disaster response and recovery space. FEMA also looked at their own workforce and believed that they needed an infusion of sort of young talent, fresh ideas, and individuals who had not only maybe classroom knowledge of emergency management, but some real on-the-ground application of emergency management skills. And they approached us, and long story short, for a little over 12 years, we've been administering the FEMA Corps program, which allows young adults 18 to 26 to come in and spend a service term focused on disaster response and recovery efforts. 70% of those program participants just last year received a job offer from FEMA. So the pipeline to employment, there's this lovely Venn diagram of sort of need, employment, and young adults interested in doing the work. And the Forest Corps essentially becomes something that is built on that type of foundation, that the Forest Service believes that model potentially can help them both advance their wildfire strategy and their reforestation strategy, but also help build a potential cadre of future employees for the conservation and climate change space. The CEO of AmeriCorps, Michael Smith, and the Forest Service Chief, Randy Moore, will sign that agreement this Friday. So we're thrilled to see that get stood up and rolling, and hope, and Jake's point about scale is one that we're consciously aware of. We're going to start small, try to get it right, iron out a couple kinks, and then cross our fingers that there is an opportunity for scale further down the line. So yeah, the AmeriCorps NCCC Forest Corps becomes official this Friday, and recruitment for members also opens this Friday.
Right, so people can apply to be part of it beginning Friday.
That's correct, yeah.
That's awesome. That's so exciting. I wonder if the other Rolla and Jake can talk a little bit about what other sectors you see young people getting involved in the training, making a difference while training on climate.
Go ahead, Rolla.
Thank you, Jake. There are one of the things, I guess one of the misconceptions, once you get into the field, you are, you just stick with one thing. And the truth is that everything is interrelated, and, getting to urban greening might lead to agroecology or sustainable agriculture. Go into organic waste and food recovery may lead to circular economy and waste management. Everything is interrelated, and there isn't one solution that fits all, but some of the sectors, we see, we need a lot of young and not necessarily just young folks, but everyone to be more mindful and aware of our personal impact. And it doesn't take necessarily a full-on training or a full-on fellowship, but for those that choose to immerse themselves into these different sectors, end up. It's one of those things that when you get in, you think that you come in with some knowledge, but you end up, getting so much more knowledge. And so, the all this to say that the climate field is very vast, and the sectors, the areas of focus that we offer are entry points, and we are eagerly, we are witnessing a lot of our fellows diving into other branches of what those areas of focus could afford. Another sector where I think there will be a lot of growth, or that needs a lot of growth, is climate data analytics and modeling. This is very important to understand climate patterns, to predict climate-related events, to also make database decision and effective strategies. And young professionals with expertise in data analytics can really contribute to climate modeling and assessment and decision-making processes that inform policies at a state level. And the other piece that, or the other sector that, is also has been growing ever since I got into this sector is environmental education and advocacy. And there's the power of awareness and education should not be underestimated. We see a lot of our fellows
I think we temporarily lost Rolla. Ken, are you there? And Jake?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
and you are. I think we temporarily lost Rolla. Maybe Madison can let her know that, and she can try to come on again. In the meantime, Jake, do you want to talk a little bit about what sort of sectors young folks are working in and what you're seeing on the ground?
Sure. Yeah. I appreciated Ken's use of the term cadre. We're trying out coalition as one of our kind of sub cohort or subsector specialization tracks. And what we've seen now for at least more than half of the Climate Corps existence is Rolla back? Just want to make sure she can finish. Hi, Rolla. We lost you at Fellows.
Hi.
We lost you at Fellows.
Oh, fellas, okay. So I guess I'll go back to the last area. I think another sector where we see young people working on climate making a difference is environmental education and advocacy. A lot of our fellows engage in environmental education, climate volunteerism, which is a focal point of this fellowship program, and what distinguishes it from other programs is the empowering communities to take actions within their communities through those volunteer events. Our fellows are working and hosted by nonprofit organizations, local government, and organizations, grassroots organizations that are deeply ingrained in the communities that they are serving, and having professionals come in, preferably hiring within the communities where they can actually make an impact in the communities where they grew up in, or where they already have roots in. Really makes a difference. Working with organizations that are within their communities, and seeing the fruits of their efforts, seeing the direct impact that they're doing, is a form of advocacy. And so now in our social media and digital digital world, I guess, there are other effective tools for raising awareness and mobilizing support for climate action. So I think those are the sectors that come to mind.
Great, thank you, Rolla. And Jake, you were in the middle of talking about what you were seeing on the ground.
Yeah, and Rolla, I appreciated also your kind of starting with talking about how the climate field, you can kind of go a mile wide and an inch deep. You can learn about so many different sectors and how they interconnect. I'll add a couple more. We certainly have seen, data analysis and advocacy and education as key elements in a lot of our fellow scopes. What we're starting to see, certainly in California and other parts of the US, is a need from corporations to really dial in ESG, or environmental social governance reporting and requirements, especially scope 3 emissions, due to recent legislation in California in particular, but certainly nationwide. And that is one place where we think, fellows can have kind of an outsized impact. Often those are small teams, but they radically at times can transform business and supply chains, all kinds of operations towards more climate friendly practices. We also have seen, I think, a steady increase over the years, especially the last couple of years, particularly with COVID, for K-12 and higher ed institutions and partners that we've had over the years, really needing support in bridging, well, first of all, in their facilities and operations, just kind of fundamentally, and having the resources and skilled folks to do work in the facilities and kind of built environment sector, but really bridging the, understanding, say, a solar and storage installation at a school or at a university, and then making sure that the students have access to that as a learning resource. So Campus as a Living Lab is kind of the model for that. We've really seen fellows be incredibly successful in that kind of, it's often like a near peer relationship. So they're only a couple of years older, or sometimes almost peers with the people they're working with, and able to show a real trajectory of like, you can go into this field, like here's what a climate job can look like, to somebody who's just a few years out from pursuing something like that. And so we also tend to work with career counselors and kind of create that pathway as kind of clearly as we can for current students as well, because of the education programs we also run. So the education sector is a really important one. As I mentioned, we're just hearing from schools across the board how under-resourced they are in multiple states. And this really kind of degraded or infrastructure in their built environment that really needs support and upgrades with HVAC systems or just energy management, green operations, et cetera. And so kind of building on that, the built environment is, a place where we see really across the sectors an opportunity for us to continue to build this group. We've had for about 8 years a real focus on either strategic energy management or green operations and maintenance with partnership with the San Mateo Energy Associates, and also in partnership with NEEC, who run the building operator certification, and also with the Green Building Association, USGBC, who provide the LEED certification. So what we've seen is that there's basically this kind of scaffold gap between folks who want to be doing facilities and energy management work, but from recent grads to get to kind of like even sometimes entry-level positions, we're building those steps along the way. So we know, for example, in Washington State, because of clean building performance standards, they have this incredible need for a workforce that can be responsive to those standards. And at the same time, the folks who are doing that work are either retiring or don't have the resources and skills and need that training. And so it's this really interesting opportunity to bring folks into the climate field really through buildings and through, it's both greenhouse gas emission reduction, obviously, but it's also really thinking creatively and strategically and in innovative ways about how to use the built environment effectively and lower costs and lower energy use kind of across the board. And so that's one of the ways that we try and be responsive to like what sectors are demanding, like what do we see in specific regions, and Washington is by no means the only state doing that. Oregon has just recently almost kind of copied Washington, or tried to extend those clean building performance standards, and we know this is happening in many states across the country as well. So we're excited about those kinds of pathways where we see a real demand and then also a future need. These kinds of building performance standards are only going to become ever more increasingly stringent, as we've seen in California and other states that are really leading and continuing to have these aggressive, kind of policies year after year. So that's also a way that we really are kind of future-proofing the work, is ensuring that it's something that's ideally enshrined in policy, something that's only going to continue to be a demand in the field.
Thanks so much, Jake. I think that point that a lot of professionals in some of these fields are retiring, it just underscores the need. I know that that's true in the Forest Service as well, that there's this group of really skilled folks who are retiring, and this is like an opportunity that we don't want to let slip away for them to pass on their knowledge to the next generation, and this is a program that can help do that. I'm getting lots of really great questions, so I'm going to hope to go through them all, and I have at least one or two I want to make sure that I ask. But first of all, someone asked, could someone provide an overview of the Climate Corps program that is about to be announced, that actually has been announced? And I guess we, going back, we ought to give an overview, and I'm going to ask Ken to do that. My understanding is that this is not just one agency, but many federal agencies participating in it through using the programs that Congress really already approved to act on climate and act on infrastructure. So it's not just one place, it's all across the federal government. So with that, kicking it off, Ken, why don't you give us a quick overview so that people who are really interested in getting involved know how to do that.
Yeah, thanks, Marianne. I believe I at least attempted to drop into the Q&A section here the fact sheet on American Climate Corps. So hopefully you all will be able to see that if I did that correctly. Executive action taken by the President September 20th, announcing the launch of an American Climate Corps. I think what Jake Rolla and I represent is sort of programs that helped get to the point that an announcement for an American Climate Corps was made. The work that Rolla's talking about, Jake's talking about, or that AmeriCorps has been involved in, is in large part foundational work that brought us to the point that there was the ability to make that type of announcement on September 20th. Now here we are, 2 months later. I would offer that a lot of the details on execution, how this is going to work, what it's going to look like, are still being formulated as we move forward. I think your point, Marianne, about multiple agencies having a role, so that you're not just thinking, while the world I live in right now with AmeriCorps and CCC may be very narrow in terms of thinking about a relationship with the Forest Service to get the Forest Corps stood up. There is anticipation and aspiration that it is broader and bigger than that. I will also offer, I was looking at a couple of the questions in the chat, that opportunities at the local level and at the regional level, I think that is very much the hope, that you're seeing those opportunities come out. At one of the questions I saw in there, like, how can you get engaged, or how can you find out more information? Certainly in the AmeriCorps universe, I think one of the best resources is 48 of the 50 states have what's called a state service commission, and that's who administers the AmeriCorps program at the state level. They're also just like wonderful human beings who are subject matter experts on how to navigate AmeriCorps and how that works. So that's a great place. They're called state service commissions, 48 of 50 states. That's a great place to be looking for information as this gets built out. And then I saw a question about how young adults could get more information. I believe there was a high school teacher. So I will I'll go back to the Q&A and find that and drop in a sign up. There is a sign up place for people to receive information and stay informed as details are further fleshed out.
Thanks so much, Ken. Lots of
Sure.
good practical information as well as the bigger concepts we're going over here. One of the things I wanted to make sure to ask you all is what you're doing to make sure that environmental justice is prioritized in this program. This was something the president announced from the beginning. I don't know, whoever wants to jump in on that, go right ahead and jump in. Or I'll call on you, Ken. Do you want to start? And
Sure. I think it is very intentionally the hope. Like we know that the impacts of climate change are not experienced equally across all residents. So the hope for the American Climate Corps and climate programming in general for AmeriCorps is increasingly targeted to those who experience the highest burdens of poverty and racial inequity. There are a couple specific things that sort of accompany that. For those of you who track the AmeriCorps universe, you're familiar with the fact that there have been really concerted efforts over the past few years to increase living allowances for members to make sure that that more Americans are able to serve their nation and able to participate in these programs. And you will see that in the American Climate Corps aspirations, continuing to build on that momentum so that the young adults who might find themselves serving in climate programs in the future continue to find less barriers when they're looking to apply to be a part of these programs. And then I'll speak just a little bit again to the small world that I live in. We do not have an education requirement. We do not have a prior skills requirement. We cover all costs of program participation, from transportation to lodging and everything else. So getting the barriers to participation out of the way so that there are more opportunities for young adults to participate, and then partnering with organizations who can provide some of the technical training and skill development so that the young adults are positioned to be successful. The point that was earlier made a little bit earlier with the Forest Service and some of that skill and knowledge that is there with some of the employees there who may be soon retiring. Like for us, that was super appealing, right? Like how can we get young adults in their formative years to have access to that type of training, then get the hands-on experience, and then hopefully find themselves in a position to be competitive for future employment.
Great. And Ken also spoke to one of the other audience questions, which is, what are you doing to try to recruit young people from disadvantaged communities and people not pursuing the four-year college path? It sounds like that's very much front of mind. Rollo, how do you find environmental justice working as part of what you all are doing in the Bay Area?
Yeah, I also wanted to thank you, Marianne. I wanted to clarify that California Climate Action Corps is offered throughout the state. We have partnerships from Butte and northern counties all the way down to San Diego and even the border of California and Mexico. This is a question that we always ask ourselves. And I think the approach that we've taken, to prioritize environmental justice is to start with our internal team and prioritize DEI work, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, DEIB. And our team underwent and still going actually through a series of DEIB workshops in order for us to understand how this will translate into the programmatic components and how we can best provide or serve the members and the fellows that are applying to our program. I think our biggest priority is equitable program access, as Ken mentioned. There are barriers to participating in an AmeriCorps program. Not everyone can afford or have the financial support to be in an AmeriCorps program. We have made a push to recruit from BIPOC groups, to advocate for stipend increases, to provide additional benefits, still trying to figure out ways, to tackle the housing crisis in California. You're all probably aware, it doesn't matter which part of California you're serving at, housing is always an issue. And even though we are not, we don't unfortunately provide housing vouchers, we are always looking for opportunities and collaborative opportunities to be able to provide those supportive services so the fellows can have a great member experience and not worry whether or not they will be able to have dinner or have a meal the next day. So we are looking at those different facets of accessibility. We want to actively engage underrepresented groups, so that when they are working within their communities, they can now engage in tailored solutions to vulnerable communities and work on projects and initiatives that specifically address those local environmental concerns in vulnerable and marginalized communities. We want we hope that through the work that we are doing internally and as it translates into the program, we are able to to empower community members to actively participate in climate action and also the decision-making process. We also offer two very exciting training, and Jake touched on the trauma-aware training through UC Climate Stewards, and this is a very very exciting partnership where we are combining the science of climate change with the social, emotional resilience and trauma-aware practices, which in turn will help the fellow to empower their communities and to really understand the dynamics of their local community. Another course we are also offering is called Bridging Differences. And this is another critical, I guess, more focused on the soft skill than the hard skills. This is a bridge builder program that closes the psychological gaps between us and them. We want our fellows to work with empathy and understanding. We want our fellows to really start embracing the values of being conscious and aware of how they are engaging communities, how they are engaging with one another. The climate change problem is not it's not one group that's affected, but everyone is affected, and we have to find ways for for us to come together to develop those solutions that make sense, again, within local communities. And so yeah, so in a gist, we're doing a lot of DIB work. We are offering training that also promote those values, to those values coming from an understanding and from an empathy perspective, as well as ensuring that we are able to break down some of those barriers to access to AmeriCorps programs.
Right, right. What Rola said is so interesting because it shows that being involved in Climate Corps, it isn't just about clearing the forest of hazardous fuels. It's also about being in a community together, addressing this large crisis we're all addressing together, and understanding the human impact, and really I think the empathy part is something we all need in as we're approaching these impacts of climate change. Jake, did you want to talk about any of the environmental justice aspects of your work?
Yeah, I'll add a few quick elements. Both what Ken and Rola shared are similar to things that we've been thinking about and are continuing to improve. I mean, I think, Marianne, after what you just said in terms of the empathy piece and being in community, I really think we saw this a lot during the pandemic of just mutual aid, and actually, the fellows, working at food banks, like volunteering their time. I do think there's a spirit of like just communal connection, like you're describing, almost kind of built into these programs, but certainly one that we think about cultivating and give fellows the space and the time to do those types of supports. But because we're a nonprofit, we have flexibility, to make the program accessible to a large audience with increased stipend and wages and benefits. We often are able, I mentioned before about being creative and kind of scrappy. We braid funding pretty regularly, and pretty successfully in new regions in particular, bringing in philanthropy, funding and support where we can to make it more accessible to a broad range of fellows coming into the program. And then when we do work with the private sector, those wage levels have to be competitive within the sector. So we're able to really have this kind of sliding scale and approach, both for the fellows to get a different range depending on kind of the skills and the scope that they bring to it and what's required in the position. And also what we try and think about is some kind of, along with sliding scale is, no one turned away for lack of funds, right? So when we're building programs in a new region or, for a specific funding opportunity like NOAA, for example, we think about our partners, maybe in the corporate sector, who have more resources available to support, maybe in the public sector where there may not be the same level of resource. So we're creatively, kind of and directly and transparently telling our partners this is what we expect and anticipate what cost share looks like. That I think is also a key dimension of equity and thinking about environmental justice. Another thing we're able to do in new regions and have been really successful in Oregon, with that kind of braided funding model, is to not just prioritize, but almost solely work with BIPOC-led organizations, in part because of the funding that we had available for that work, and in part because we wanted to commit to that. That was what was needed in the region to add capacity specifically around energy and equity. And we've done that cohort for multiple years now because of philanthropic support, in particular foundation support. And so that's been really exciting, and Similarly, on the East Coast, our work with historically Black colleges and universities, where we have an emphasis on supporting those communities with fellows in higher ed and showing them career trajectories into these sectors where they are underrepresented. So that is definitely a commitment that we have as an organization to add capacity where it's needed, to focus on underrepresented groups in the field in particular. We recently, as Rollo is speaking to, kind of doing the internal tuning up and learning as an organization, we're thinking about how we track demographics effectively over time, what are our recruitment practices, because we are a co-supervisor with our partners. We really think about, and we've learned from groups like Elemental Accelerator, for example, who do wraparound services to the folks they work with around microaggressions, around just like workplace kind of dimensions that we could be learning together about. The fellows at that site, right, for the majority of their hours. So how can we also transform potentially in some ways the place where they're working and the experience of their, day-to-day scope, right? So we think about how can we extend out some of these changes that we're learning about internally as an organization with our partners, and even to the point where we're thinking about really having commitments from our partners and being selective around who we work with, also similarly having a commitment to DEI and environmental justice. So those are some ways. I do think we also, because we have flexibility with kind of our funding mechanisms and who we work with, and we can be selective, we've been really successful on the recruitment side, to kind of change the way that we're thinking about, bringing in folks directly from the communities that they're working in. In particular, one recent example in the Pacific Northwest is the federal funding that supported some of our work with tribes, and fellows in tribes required the fellows to be registered tribal citizens. And so we're able to be effective in recruiting from that community for those roles, which we were excited about, and was something that kind of built that partnership and made it something that persisted year after year. So those are a couple of ways. That internal, that external, and really thinking about how we can have those concentric circles of impact too with our partners.
Right. One of the audience members actually asked about what's being done to work with Indigenous communities. So it sounds like you're already doing that sort of work, right, Jake? I think the Department of Interior also is going to be part of this larger federal program. So again, there's lots of opportunities there. So the audience is asking some really like nuts and bolts questions. One of them are the members of the Climate Corps, are they compensated? And if so, how much? What sort of salary, stipend, whatever do they get?
I can talk a little bit about sort of AmeriCorps programming and how stipends are done, and refer back to sort of the previous comment that these are things that we are across AmeriCorps trying to see trend in an upward direction. So for most of the way that the agency works, organizations receive grant funding from AmeriCorps, and then they administer their program as they see fit. The agency has moved in the direction of increasing the expectation with the grant funding about stipends that would be awarded to members. And then different programs have the ability to say, yeah, but we're going to increase that by X amount. And so it can look a little different. It can look a little different across the country. What you see with American Climate Corps is an aspirational move towards a level of 15 per hour compensation for members. And then again, just speaking to the world that I live in, for the NCCC Forest Corps, that will be a 15 an hour equivalent. But our program model is a little different than perhaps some of the grant-funded AmeriCorps programs, in that we provide housing, transportation. We take care of all of the expenses that, for another program, the individual member may assume responsibility for. But the aspirational target is to get towards 15. That, of course, requires congressional support to get there, but that is the way that things are hoping to go on the Climate Corps front.
Right. I remember reading that was how the Forest Service was hoping to do it. And it makes a lot of sense because a lot of the places where they work are very remote. And one of the problems in getting the personnel is getting people out there to where the need is. And so doing the housing, et cetera, is really just very crucial.
Yeah, Marianne, on that, I'll pause on that point because
Yeah.
I think you hit on something that that at least I see in the bit of national service that I have visibility on, which is that housing has always been challenging, particularly when you think about housing in some of the communities or locations that perhaps have the highest need for the type of support that AmeriCorps resources can help mobilize. And that is only growing more difficult. The housing challenge is very real, and we're going to have to look at some different solutions, public-private partnerships, other things, as we think creatively about how to address that, because I don't see that being a problem that's going to get easier for us.
Right. And Rolla mentioned housing in California as well. It shows how intersectional this whole thing is. What types of requirements are there for young people to be considered for such programs? Do they need to have a high school degree, or what are you looking for these programs? Jake, do you want to jump in?
Sure. Yeah. I think we likely have, some of the broadest range of scopes and partnerships. So we do have fellows coming in from, recent graduates, typically from 2 and 4 year degree programs. But we are, in some of our programs, we're waiving those requirements because as long as they have, the commitment, the interest, and really the capacity to do the work, that's actually what matters most in terms of getting the work done. And the supports that we provide through the cohort, and the trainings, we really assume will also prepare them for their sector specific knowledge that they need. So we have over the years, done a significant rethink around like, what is it that these scopes actually need? On I would say different end of the spectrum in terms of working with potentially a utility or in a strategic energy management type of role, having 1 to 2 years experience or even a degree, sometimes it's an advanced degree, really actually makes a significant difference for the scope and for them to kind of hit the ground running. And so we take it case by case, really kind of guided by what the partner is telling us they need in the scope. And we also want to make sure the fellow is set up for success. So we're not placing someone who doesn't have the kind of minimum requirements. We want to make sure they're set up for success and they're going to be able within the first couple of months to settle in and really understand the scope, but then really start moving with it pretty quickly as well. So we do a lot of vetting. We do careful analysis and make sure it's both a good fit for the site for the fellow and also a good fit for the fellow when they're thinking about what their career trajectory is, and that it is a natural next step, which may be a challenge for them, but they're still up for that challenge really and ready for that type of commitment.
Great. Ken, when we talk about forests, we talk about the need for hazardous fuels management. One of the audience questions is, but will the Forest Corps members also be working on things like tree planting for carbon sequestration and that sort of thing?
Yeah, great question. Let me start just by pivoting back and following on with the question that you'd posed to Jake. For the NCCC Forest Corps, there's no educational requirement. It's 18 to 26 full stop. So It's the barriers. Again, that's part of the aspiration of continuing to remove and reduce barriers to participation. So for the Forest Corps, there's two primary guiding documents that the Forest Service is using for determining the type of work that the members will do. One is the wildfire mitigation strategy, which I had dropped in the Q&A. The other is the reforestation strategy that the Forest Service has in place. And the goal is for members to be involved in work that has a bit of both of those going on. So yes, Marianne, there is a desire, at least as we get started, to see members not only involved in the fire mitigation work, but to be involved in the reforestation efforts as well. We do not yet, I mentioned a little bit earlier that the recruitment for members opens this Friday. The identification of service locations by the Forest Service, that's also ongoing and underway right now. The first cohort will arrive for training in June and then start their service commitments in the beginning of July. So we have a bit of lead time between now and July to see how the Forest Service actually goes about identifying the priorities, but it's around those two main guiding documents, their wildfire mitigation strategy and their reforestation strategy.
Great, great. One audience member asks about, is there demographic data? I'm not sure that there is yet because the federal program is so new, but Rola, what do you see about as far as diversity in the California program? Like what are the demographics, the age range, just what parts of the state? Is it urban, rural?
Yeah, no, I also wanted to go back about the question of stipend and
Yeah.
provide a little information on that as well. And so California Climate Action Corps has reached the ceiling on the annual stipend that a fellow could get, and that's about $33,000 a year for about 11 months of commitment in the fellowship. That's around 1,700 hours. So if you do the math, 33K by 17, the hourly rate is higher than the minimum wage, which is a great accomplishment and achievement for AmeriCorps programs, especially in California, where we know that the living wage is not sufficient. As much as we push for it, it's still not sufficient in the state. And at the end of their 1,700-hour commitment, they also get an educational award, and we are very grateful that the state of California offers what they call California for All Award, in addition to the Siegel Education Award that is offered through AmeriCorps. And combined, the educational award amounts to $10,000, which is a great motivator and a great addition to the living stipend that our fellows get. And we really try to, provide added benefits to support the fellow throughout their fellowship to ensure that they have a successful member experience. And that comes mainly in the form of professional development, where we put in a lot of resources to provide the best training we could provide, and also partner with certifying organizations to ensure that our fellows are getting certifications while serving in the California Climate Action Corps. So going back to your question, Marianne, about the demographics of the program, we have about, I want to say, the majority of our members are in the age group between 25 to 35 years old. Many of our members have graduated from college, and and are looking for ways to get into the climate sectors. AmeriCorps programs are a great segue for fresh out of college students that want to explore and figure out what they want to do. We always hope that CCAC actually serves as a catalyst. That's my personal mission. As education has served as a catalyst, for me, we hope that CCAC is that catalyst for a lot of our fellows to or use the fellowship as a launch pad into this sector. We also have participants who are transitioning careers, and a fellowship, an AmeriCorps fellowship, and CCAC is another avenue for mid-career transitions, again, to see what the sector looks like, what type of work they'll be doing. It really serves as an opportunity to test drive, if you will, what a career in the climate sector would look like, and how that would impact that person individually, because working in this sector is hard. It's hard work. It's draining emotionally, mentally, intellectually, and knowing how to embed self-care techniques to be able to better serve the communities and to be able to provide the best version of yourselves in this sector. It's very important to see if this is for you or not. We also have members that are retired and really want to give back. And, they feel that the climate crisis is urgent, and they want to leave behind a legacy and really pave the way for future generations to enjoy the things that we take for granted in our environment. And so, of course, like this age group is a lot less. I want to say the majority of age group of members out of college is about 80% or so. In terms of diversity, this is our largest full-term program to date. So full-term is the 11-month fellowship. We have about more than 300 participants. We are seeing a lot more diversity in this term, and I think this is a result of our team actively recruiting from as I mentioned, non-traditional, marginalized and BIPOC groups, to ensure that the work that is being done by our members is representative of the communities that they are serving. And as to requirements to entry, there are AmeriCorps requirements that we cannot avoid. We are funded by AmeriCorps through California Volunteers. And those are, being a U.S. resident or a U.S. citizen. That's one of the hard qualifications, to be able to participate in an AmeriCorps program. Also, we perform background checks. For program-specific requirements, it's as Jake mentioned, a passion for wanting to be in this sector, and some related experience. We don't want to increase the barriers to access by adding a college degree or by adding any kind of educational qualification in order to be part of the program.
Right. Thank you so much, Rola. We're getting near the end. It went so fast. I wanted to make sure to get to the real practical sort of questions we're getting, and I love this one because it shows a lot of our listeners here are from government agencies and or working at the state and local level. And one person asks, are there studies that show the positive benefits of these programs to states, to help us pitch these programs to our states that have been less engaged in this? How do we make the pitch for our state to that this is really beneficial? I think Ken mentioned that amazing statistic about the pipeline to FEMA from your AmeriCorps program and how successful that has been. Is there anything else you can point people to with a mind to, how can they interest their policymakers in getting involved?
As a starting point, Marianne, I will drop here in the chat, and thank you, Sarah, for pointing out to me that I put several things in the chat that I need to make sure go to the full group. But for AmeriCorps, we have what's called the Evidence Exchange, which the agency's Office of Research and Evaluation works with independent researchers to assess the impact of AmeriCorps on a variety of different levels, both on individual development for members, community impact. I find that to be a wonderful place to be able to at least start. And then I'll go back to the state service commissions, which will oftentimes have a much more localized view of such research and data. But I do think that the Evidence Exchange is a great place to at least start.
Advice for state agencies that are looking to take part in the program, what should they be doing?
I can speak briefly to that, but even yesterday, I was approached by ICF about basically a ROI study on Climate Corps type of programs, AmeriCorps and beyond, and they provided an example of one that I think was done in Montana recently, and so I'm just starting to see some of these studies emerge and some of the analysis done by respected consultants like ICF in the field. And as Ken mentioned, AmeriCorps, and there's a lot of reporting required from programs, and so I think there's probably a healthy data set. One of the things that I did notice and sort of caught my attention in the ICF request in particular was not just kind of the ROI that we think of in terms of financial payback, but also in terms of social impact. And so I think that's one piece that can continue to be. I haven't seen those studies as much, but I'm excited to see that starting to be taken into account. For us, the key number that we typically share is about 85% of our fellows either are hired on into their position, either or continue in the same trajectory in their sector that they worked in, water, energy, waste, et cetera, or they go back to grad school. So that's kind of like a metric that we often point back to that's pretty consistent year after year. But as I mentioned before, we are really trying to get a better sense of longitudinal data for not just, where are the fellows a year after, or 2 years after, 3 years after, but really even now that the program's been around since 2010, 5, 10, 15 years after the program. So that's some impact data that we're really trying to start to find, both gather and then also kind of make sense of. So that's what we're up to now.
Great. What should government agencies or local nonprofits, what should they be doing right now to get involved? Ken, what do you advise for them to make a connection with this program?
Yeah, let's go again, like sort of polar ends. I dropped into the chat here yeah, there we go. A way to sign up to get updates and have information about what's going on at the national level as the White House looks to convene these different federal agencies and get this effort moving. So I think they're tracking at the macro level. How is this coming together? What are the updates? What are the different pieces that start to firm up, get announced, and get rolled out? So I would encourage tracking that. And then I think engaging at the really the state and regional level is going to be equally valuable. I think when I was talking earlier about how AmeriCorps and CCC moved into the space, it was initially through state partnerships and then through regional partnerships with federal agencies. And I think making those connections while at the same time tracking the national landscape will be key. And then I'll make another plug again for the state service commissions, because how can you get to individual organizations that are doing absolutely wonderful work at the local level, like what Rolla and Jake are experiencing? Oftentimes the State Service Commission can help somebody go from trying just to search all of that to being able to give some concrete examples, make some introductions, and get things rolling.
That's great. Thank you for all those resources. That sounds great. This one question may be a way to end up, and one of the audience members, notes in addition to addressing the needs of disadvantaged and unrepresented groups, which is great. There's also a need to reach people who are, as this person puts it, spending the most money or generating the most greenhouse gases. And in a way, these members of the Climate Corps could be ambassadors, getting out the word or influencing other people across, at their colleges, in their communities, on how important it is to take climate into take climate into account in really everything we're doing in society. Are you finding that the students and young people that you're working with take this message out, not just that they're getting jobs for themselves, but want to continue to make a difference on climate? Rolla?
I can go and share some of the collective climate impact that our fellows have contributed to. Last year, from October 2022 to August 2023, collectively, our fellows, and that was a cohort of about 115 members, diverted 28 million pounds of food and organic waste.
Wow.
They planted and donated about 10,000 trees, maintained 75,000 trees. They educated about 6,500 people, engaged 65,000 people in throughout the state. And we've seen about 47,000 of volunteer hours just in 1 year with a cohort of 115 members. We're very proud of this data, and we collect this data to actually show the collective impact that our members are doing on the ground, working with their host partner and our partner organizations. And we want to amplify their voices. We want to basically share that this program is, as Ken mentioned a little bit, the mobilizing at the ground level. This is a bottom to top approach, by really showcasing the impact and the successes of these fellows. We want this message to be heard loud and clear, not only by local government or state government or federal government, but also with honestly, with every type of business, corporate, nonprofit, for-profit, et cetera. Like, it really shows the power of collective action and what can be accomplished with a cohort of 115 members. To accomplish these numbers, we are really looking forward to seeing our current cohort, which has tripled in numbers, and what impact they will do throughout the state.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you so much. It's such a great note to end on too, is the successes. Um, I I really thank Ken Goodson from AmeriCorps and Jake Pollock from SEI and Rola Halawanji from California Climate Corps for just the great insights today. And thank you, Madison at ELI.
Thank you so much to our wonderful speakers today. Thank you to Rola, Ken, and Jake for tackling all of these many questions from our audience and for spending some time with us. Thank you to Marianne as well for leading this great discussion. We so appreciate all of your time. As a reminder, for our folks in the audience, if you were unable to attend the full event, ELI members will be able to watch the recording of this webinar within a few business days on ELI's event webpage. We hope to see you at future ELI programs. You can find all of our programming at eli.org. So thank you all so much and have a great day, everybody.
You too. Thank you.